Is he gonna ask Vladimir Putin about the ceasefire, about the way that Donald Trump wants a ceasefire together with Europeans, and how is that going to be? How do you find the response, the answer from the Russian president in terms of ceasefire?
I mean, it have been answered by Russian Foreign Ministry non-stop in the last 72 hours. There's no ceasefire. There could be only ceasefire in terms of the humanitarian reasons, so-called air, for some like short term, like Russians declared this before. It's like 72-hour ceasefire or 48-hour ceasefire, especially to collect the bodies primarily of the rotting bodies of the armed forces of Ukraine on the tactical in the tactical zones, because obviously it's a huge sanitary issue. When your corpses are beginning to rot, first you cannot be there; it smells horribly, and then of course there is a huge danger of infectious diseases and things like that. So Russians did it before, so they might go and do it again. But the point is, special military operation continues, and uh, yeah, Russia doesn't talk to Europe. Russians know who Europeans are. They know what Ukraine is. They know what is behind them. So, yeah, you cannot talk to those people. You cannot talk to Merz or Macron, and that is why, as my good friend Baron King wrote some piece. If you look attentively at this, yeah, United States and Russia are actually joined by the hip by Arctic, and if many people forget that geographically, United States and Russia are literally neighbors. You go to Chukotka and Nome, you can walk there, once it's frozen. Obviously it's going to take you half a day or day to do it, but it's just, yeah, it's Bering Strait. And then, you know what? You look across from the Diomede Islands, you look at the United States. And United States, people from the United States look at that's why Alaska is so critical. It's not only former Russian territory, it is also geographically there. There's a lot of symbolism, and when you go and look attentively actually at Mr. Gilpin, the first governor of the state of Colorado, he was dreaming of making Denver the basically transcontinental capital by building this railroad from Denver, Colorado through Alaska, through Bering Strait. Obviously, it was a fantastic idea. Even today, it's practically impossible. But yeah, that was the whole idea. Can you imagine, this railway from Denver, Colorado through, Anchorage to great Russian Siberian cities and things like that? It might yet come to fruition, who knows? But United States and Russia, economically, they will always have a separate discussion. Then Russians don't even have discussions with Europeans. There's nothing to talk to, and they are fanatical Russophobes, and Europe is over, basically. So, but in economic front, there is a lot to be gained, actually, especially by the United States. Don't forget, the United States cannot refill, so to speak, its budget. It's a bloated budget. The tax base is shrinking, and the situation obviously, is horrible. For you, you can only print money if you want to quantitative easing, whatever. And suddenly, if you can get any kind of the parts in the development of the Arctic, which only Russia can provide for the United States, because the United States has no icebreaker fleet. The United States has no ability to do what Russians do in Arctic. Listen, the number of resources, the amount, the volume of the resources in Arctic is gigantic, from oil to gas to rare earth, whatever. It's just colossal. I mean, so the technologies are there. Russians are waiting. Let's see what Russians offered the United States the Krasnoyarsk enrichment facilities, to invest $15 billion and then have the access to, by the way, rare earth minerals and things like that. Obviously, the United States declined. I mean, okay, Russia said, okay, we'll do it ourselves, and they are doing it themselves. But still, there are many projects which could be done to the great benefit of both countries. And will they discuss it? Obviously, with people like Besant, yeah, I mean, the guy is moron. Okay, let's put it this way. But Silvanov going to be talking to him probably about the issue of the financial transactions and banking sector which is critical for not for BRICS. BRICS is doing it itself, but itself, they transfer money within the BRICS on their completely on their own. But it will be about the situation what has happened to those $300 billion of frozen assets. And if Mr. Besant will not get the message, well, too bad. Russians don't care. They're just saying we have the list of conditions which have been reiterated for the last 38 months now, and said, there you go, take it or leave it.
What are the immediate decisions on the part of the United States, in your opinion, in terms of the aid going to Ukraine? Are they going to ask, I'm talking about the Russians, are they going to ask the United States just stop sending weapons? Or maybe if they have weapons in Europe, not let your weapon get in the hand of Ukrainians, or providing Ukrainians with intelligence? We know the Starlink is providing them with the internet connection to be used by drones, which is, I think Donald
Yeah.
Trump can do something about it. And do you think that they're going to talk about these details? These are important if you want to put an end to the conflict.
Well,
You have to
Belarus,
start
yeah.
somewhere.
Again, Trump already stated, surprisingly, oh yeah, if nothing comes out of it, we are washing our hands. Hey, dude, Russia told you to wash off your hands for since the start of the special military operation. And not only to Trump, to Biden, and they never got the message, but Russians are on record. It doesn't matter what. First, there's nothing, they cannot supply anything. United States has no industrial capability to support such kind of war. Simple as that. And Europeans even more so, because it's just the paper tigers. It's a bunch of the, chihuahuas. So if Trump does this, sure, good. Then other doors may open, But yeah, it doesn't matter. It's, again, what can possibly United States give Ukraine? Thought there would be very many Russians, in the missile force saying, "Oh yeah, please give it to us," because obviously we love to have those million rubles, just being millions of rubles as the bonuses. What can they give nuclear weapons to Ukraine? Obviously, it's out of the question. And if United States cannot do this, Europe is not even in the same league. They have nothing. They admitted it. They had this meeting. The only thing they can do is just bark from underneath the bench in the room where the big guys discuss things. They are nobodies. And this is what I constantly say for many years. Europe is not the subject of the international relations. It is object. And it's going to be handled by the United States as United States deems necessary. They can go out there and pretend that they matter. They don't. Not a single country in Europe matters in the long run and in the larger scheme of things. And that's probably the inevitable outcome of what Europe did. And there is a price to pay. And as I wrote, and many people say that Europe achieved what even 10 years ago would have been unthinkable. Russian society hates Europe, hates as a whole. Overwhelming majority of Russians hate Europe. And with this comes they hate Europeans, many of them. So, and they achieved that, great achievement. So let them go, basically now fade out or fade away from the world scene. And this is probably the natural and organic outcome of the people who basically, they were they were the source of the two most destructive world wars in the human history. These were Europeans. And, saying there is a price to pay. Nothing happens in this world without consequences. And these are consequences on the historical scale. The only thing they were saved by the on the other one part, the Soviet Union liberated from Nazism. They didn't like it, so okay, sure, the Russians should have allowed, I guess, basically the Poles to be exterminated by Germans and others, But yeah, they remember now all those nasty Ruskies, So, and Sure, and but United States provided the basically help, aid, support for Europe in a sense by events of the immediate post World War II time period, especially with the Berlin Lift and all that kind of thing, Marshall Plan and things of this nature, thus extending the existence of this Europe for another, well, not really 80, about 80 years, 70 years, let's put it this way. Now Europe is coming down to its natural state, the state of the all kinds of the localities, they called countries now, which are going to be at each other's throats. And if they kill each other, let them, there is no common European, how to say it, European ethnicity of you. Well, I mean, racially and ethnically, obviously, there is Europe. There are Europeans, white people of European descent, like me, for example, those Portuguese, Spaniards, or Germans. But the point is, Europe has to go back to where it was. And I don't know, I mean, Westphalian states, let them fight each other, as they always did. Let them exterminate each other. Never again the foot of Russian soldier or the single single drop of blood of Russian soldier will be on the European soil. And that's where they're coming. And so European Union will be essentially dissolved. United States will consume whatever it will decide to consume, and the businesses will be running out of Europe, somewhere to China. We know Germans are trying to do something, and that's it. So it's going to be second world or third world hellhole, and somebody has to think now how to remove the safe treasures of Louvre and other art galleries from Europe, because so what can I say? That's what it is. It's a sad end, but they wanted it. They worked for since 19th century incessantly. They just never got anything straightened out. And now that United States itself United States has resources. It has the chance. Europe doesn't.
And they don't know how to live, how to survive without the United
No,
States. They
no,
have
no.
no friend, Andre. They have
No,
no
they
friend.
have nobody. They have this is the continent, which is the peninsula to the Eurasian landmass, which is dwarfed economically, territorially, and resources by the Eurasian landmass. And they have some things left, like Airbus, for example. Okay, yeah, they probably will try to extend it, as much as possible. But for example, German economy is finished. And fact is, they might not even get those LNGs, which United States promised to provide them 3 times the price of what they were getting natural gas from Russia. Well, when you have Borrell, this alcoholic, who goes out and admits, and I quote, that European prosperity was based since 1970s on the Soviet and Russian energy supplies. They killed it, so there you go. It's your problems. You are the guys who, and many people now begin to, blame United States. No, Europe, since 1960s, was given pretty much serious, leverage in the international relations. Remember Ostpolitik by Willy Brandt and Germans, who said, and they told Reagan at some point of time to go and screw himself. We need Russian gas, we need cooperation. And there was a huge degree of the economic activity between Soviet Union and West Germany. They didn't care about, United States or troops or anything. No, it came with European peoples. It came with Germans who degenerated into this, basically combination of cattle, brainwashed cattle, and they never recovered from the utter defeat and crash of the World War II by the Red Army. So, and yeah, look at them now. And they were never friends of Russia, but at least they had enough rational thinking to understand what's good for them. Same goes for French. French, for some reason, still think that they are so irresistible. Paris is a crap hole, rat-ridden, and so it's not real. yeah, it's disgusting, smells with urine and things like that. Same goes pretty much for all of those people. The only people who are, they are also cocks, and they are also, what, this lefty ideas, not lefty really, it's neoliberal ideas, all LGBTQ and all that things, the Spain. But at least they maintain degree of the Catholic culture there, so it's not as easy, to do this to Spaniards. But again, I mean, nobody likes Russians, and Russians, for the first time, they don't care about Europeans. If the Europe dies tomorrow from hunger, Russians are not going to interfere. It's over. And Russia turned itself completely towards the east, and this gigantic conglomerate of the, not emerging, they already emerged. Well, India is emerging. It's huge. It is huge economy by volume, but obviously India needs to go this path, so to speak, what China did by lifting the hundreds of millions of people from poverty. And India is yet to achieve this, but they are developing too. And when you look attentively at this now, put together Russian, Chinese, and Indian and Brazilian economies together, it's not even serious, when you look attentively. And again, don't forget, they inflate completely, constantly those numbers. Europeans constantly lie about their economies. They are fine. Well, Netherlands, I believe Germany does it too. They count now as GDP, prostitution and drug trade. So this is everything you need to know about those people. They are not normal people. So not all of them. I'm by no means trying to, paint with a broad brush over everybody. But you know what? Russians know now for sure that Germans hate Russian gods. And good Russians got rid of those illusions and delusions about being, oh yeah, family of European people. There's not a family, they're a pedophile central. That's what it is there. So there's not a single, with the exception of Viktor Orban, there's not a single normal politician there. There's none. They're just
And
unbelievable. Fico, yeah, that's it. But again, these are small countries. They are important countries, no doubt about it, but they are small and they are close to Russia, geographically. And there is a history. Hungarians don't like Russians. Russians don't care. But at least they have this, they have this political leader who tries to preserve the, sanity in the country. So Russians don't care if they are liked anymore. That's the thing. You want to go do business, come in. It's the same what's happening with the former Soviet Union. People do not understand. The bunch of the cretins from American think tanks, that normal people do not work there. They still think that Putin wants to restore Soviet Union. Putin and Russians work hard not to restore Soviet Union again, and especially keep those, the valuable specialists from Caucasus or from those stands away from Russia. You know why? Russians live extremely well. They are beginning to live way better than Europe. And so they don't need those people, those gastarbeiters, so to speak. Those people, they were, evicting Russians from their stance and, in 1990s under the applause of the international, which is Western community. Russians don't want them. And that's what is happening right now. But again, you cannot explain to, as I already stated, average graduate of the Ivy League in some kind of whatever the hell they teach there, which is like, so the real situation, the real balance of things, the factors which play into this. And as the result, I read my lips. You can get me any kind of the so-called Russia expert from the United States, from CIA. Yeah, sure. That will be fun to talk to those people. They have no freaking clue. Okay. So, and United States and combined West wanted it, they got it. And now they're facing reality. And we'll see tomorrow what is going to happen, So there will be obviously hysteria. I know that it's reported now Anchorage is stuffed with all kinds of people. Of course, when you looked at the flight radar today, there's a lot of planes from Russia to Anchorage. I'm talking a lot. Huge numbers, like yellow stream. I don't know. There are obviously all kinds of the FSB and FSO planes, and obviously Putin IL-96. There's a number of IL-96s, Tu-214s, and probably Air Force assets like Su-35s, so maybe Su-57s also flying there, just in case, who knows. But yeah, I know the American side is trying to do the best, and that is nice, actually. Again, you know what? It's nice. It's about freaking time. There should be some kind of talk, At least Trump, if we get some kind of neutral result, Trump can check it box for himself, like, oh, you see, I was kind of able to accomplish this meeting and all that. And now, as Atlantic reported, he was begging Putin to meet him. And so we know that. We knew that. Putin knows that. And he couldn't also resist anymore because evidently he was begging him to kind of, off ramp, okay? Off ramp. Simple as that. The reality is catching up.
How you put the situation with Azerbaijan and Armenia in the whole picture?
Great question. Great question. Look, I think that Trump now has a piece of paper in his hands. And that piece of paper gives him a certain negotiating leverage with respect to Russia, with respect to Iran, and also with respect to Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Armenia. So he's just inserted himself there in the middle of it. And he's almost like the gatekeeper now by that piece of paper. Now, can the United States enforce that agreement? I don't think they can. But let's set that aside. There's a widespread assumption that Trump's position there will be antagonistic to Iran and to Russia. That's possible. And I'm sure that he's going to milk it for all that it's worth. He's going to say like, hey, you want to deal with us? We're going to need these following concessions and blah, blah, blah. He's going to try 100%, of course. But here's where I see a more likely scenario. I think it's aimed at Turkey. And I'll explain why. Because, you see, the United States people are kind of assuming that Turkey and the United States are allies because they're both in the NATO, and Turkey is the second largest military force in NATO after the United States. And it's a big country. It's a powerful, important country, blah, 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 all of these things. But if you look at the statements coming out of the Trump administration for the last 6 months, they're practically in openly hostile terms with Turkey. I think the United States is very upset with Turkey over the taking down of the Bashar al-Assad regime, because as we now know, I think you and I have discussed this before, but the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in the space of 9 days in December of last year was a big mystery, because a proper military of 250,000 troops, with an air force, with tanks, with heavy artillery, with fortifications in strategic places and so forth, folded in the space of 9 days to a force of maximum 30,000 jihadis armed with light weapons and on pickup trucks. They raided the country, and they got all the way to Damascus and met almost no opposition. And so I thought, this just can't be. This must be some kind of a trap. And so it turns out that very probably the decision was made by the Russians, that they gave the order through Syrian Arab army's generals to just simply not put up any resistance and to evacuate. And so what I know now is that, we knew this before, that part of the Syrian Arab army evacuated to Iraq, but I also learned that a part of it evacuated to Iran, and that they're still there, and that they are still a viable fighting force waiting for the right moment to go back to Syria. And so what we also learned recently is that the Turkey, which controls HTS, has been completely working on this project in cooperation with the British intelligence. So the Turks were in charge of HTS and the military assault, but the British are in charge of the strategy and the let's call it the policy aspects of the whole project. Meanwhile, the United States remains allied with the Kurds, not the Turks, not the HTS, with the Kurds. And Kurds are mortal enemies of the Turks. So and then also, there's still remnants of the Free Syrian Army that are backed by the United States, which are also at odds with HTS. So it's a huge, giant mess. Now, how did this mess happen, and how did the Brits get the Turks to incubate HTS and turn against Syria and Bashar al-Assad's regime? They promised them support for the Greater Turania Project. And the Greater Turania Project is meant to unite in some way all the Turkic people that goes, it's all the stans across the Central Asia, all the way to Turkey. So you have Turkey, then you have Armenia, and then you have Azerbaijan, which is a Turkic country. And then you have, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and all the way to China. It's Turkic people. That's the Greater Turania Project. And so Erdogan, I think, was seduced by the idea that he might emerge as the great uniter of the Turkic people across Eurasia. And that would put him in an extremely powerful position as a gatekeeper of Eurasian integrations. And I think that this is what the British intelligence used to seduce him to back their colonialist project for the Middle East. And in fact, I think this is not even a conspiracy theory. The head of the MI6, I think he's still the head of the MI. There's an incoming new head of the MI6, the woman, I forget her name, but up until very recently, or up until now, the head of the MI6 has been Sir Richard Moore, right? Sir Richard Moore was the British ambassador in Ankara for a few years, I think about 4 years' time. He speaks fluent Turkish. He is close friends with Erdogan. And he has been the one trying to recruit Turkey into their, not only their Middle Eastern project, but also their Ukraine project. They really wanted Turkey to make part of the coalition against Russia together with Ukraine, which, thanks to the very skilled diplomacy on the Russian side, they managed to sideline Turkey and keep them out of that war. Well, for the most part, but they did proceed with the Syria project along with the Brits, and this, I think, has vexed the Americans very much, and now they are on hostile terms with the Turks. And so now this whole project of uniting the Greater Turania has a weak link, which is the land corridor between Turkey and Azerbaijan, which is called the Zangezur corridor. And so now, by inserting yourself exactly there, you're now in a position to be the gatekeeper, which means that you have the Turks by the short hairs, because the whole Greater Turania project hits a brick wall at that point, unless the Americans say go. But what concessions are they going to ask to allow that Greater Turania project to go ahead? I think it's really put the Turks in a very embarrassing position. And one thing I've also observed over the last few months is that Turkey has kind of vanished from the headlines. There's this flurry of diplomatic activity going on between Azerbaijan, Armenia, Iran, China, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Saudi Arabia. Everybody's flying all over the place. They're meeting, they're holding summits, they're signing treaties, they're doing stuff. Nobody seems to be talking to Erdogan. The Chinese are not going to Ankara. Erdogan's not going to China. He's not going to Moscow. The Russians are not traveling to. Nobody's talking to the Turks. The Americans are not talking to the Turks. So it seems to me that Turkey bought into a cockamamie, insane British military misadventure in Syria, and the result has been that they find themselves isolated. And so when the Americans insert themselves to take control of the Zangezur corridor, I think they're going to use that leverage to obtain concessions from Iran and from Russia. But I think that the move was actually targeted against Turkey.
Alex, you mentioned Israel and the British project in the Middle East. I assume that they want to do the same in Ukraine. There is no end in their mind to the conflict in Ukraine. They want to continue it as long as it takes. And on the other hand, what's positive in my opinion about Donald Trump, he doesn't have that much patience to continue with a conflict that there is no end to it. Because when you look at Donald Trump and the way he talks, it's so much unbelievable. He brags about the Nord Stream pipeline, that he wasn't part of that. And I don't know why you need to do that. It doesn't look good in the eyes of other leaders. The people, you may consider the situation in the United States, but in the eyes of Chinese, Indians, Russians, Iranians, all these leaders, they don't see this as, when he talks this way, somehow they legitimize his argument. It's not a good sign for international relations. But we know that Donald Trump doesn't want to continue. He doesn't see the benefit coming out of the war in Ukraine for the United States. He wants to send more weapons, sell more weapons to Europeans.
Yes.
But on the other hand, he doesn't want the war. He's somehow in the middle of, pressure coming from Europe is doing, by the way, all of this is because of the continuation of the conflict in Ukraine. It's not because Europe is concerned about the security. It's all about, it's nonsense, in my opinion. And how do you see that? How do you see Donald Trump managing that? Do you see the guy is capable of doing this?
I'm sorry, Nima, just to be clear, capable of doing what?
Capable of managing, keeping Europeans and selling the weapons to Europeans, but after all, making some sort of deal in Ukraine that makes the situation impossible to send those weapons to Ukraine to continue this conflict. I assume that the British and those people who are running the show in Ukraine, they want the continuation of the conflict, as we saw it as we've been seeing the situation in the Middle East with Israel. How do you see that? Because it's all about more 3 years, 3.5 years. Donald Trump would be in power in the United States. Because in my opinion, what the European leaders are doing, it's beyond that. They're planning they're planning what would happen in the aftermath of Donald Trump. What do they have in their mind? In my opinion, it's all about the next president of the United States. Nobody knows who's going to be, but maybe J.D. Vance, he's going to continue the same policy. But they're somehow hoping that they can continue the conflict in Ukraine.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that Trump certainly believes that he can manage all this. And I think that he's probably right about that, because I think something you said is exactly right, that it's about his power at home. And I think that the critical, he's already made himself a lot more powerful than he was in the previous, in his first term. Partly by passing the big beautiful bill, partly by bringing Elon Musk to his side, and X changing hands from the globalist to a different manager. We have basically X is now the leading source of news for many people around the world. So he's less vulnerable to the propaganda effect. Then I think that another score has been the outing of the Russiagate documents. And I think that a very, very important lever of power are the Epstein files, which the administration has in their hands. And I think that they opted, instead of releasing it to the public, to use it as a political leverage. And then this week, over the weekend, he took control of Washington D.C. under the he put the control of the security of Washington D.C. under the federal government. So the mayor and the Metropolitan Police in Washington D.C. are now controlled by the Attorney General, and by extension by Trump. And so he has very much consolidated his political power in a much more robust way than he did in his first term. I mean, in his first term, he simply didn't. So he was being constantly 24/7 attacked, not only in the media and demonized ad nauseum, but he was also being constantly attacked through lawfare, through these endless impeachment proceedings and trials. And so he was politically very, very weak. This is not the case anymore. But the key moment will be the how do you call it, the midterm elections. So the Republicans loyal to Trump need to retain control of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And I think that this is part of the reason why Trump is going around making himself the winner in every situation. And, he's, making peace here and there, improving the economic performance in the United States. And all of these things that he's constantly very boastful about. I think that's aimed at further consolidating his political position at home. And that is, I think, from his point of view, the most important priority for his government. I think that the leaders in Russia and in China and elsewhere understand this. They're not stupid. And so they understand that a lot of his bravado, a lot of his let's call it boorish pronouncements to the public, to the press, they serve this purpose. And I think that they don't care. Vladimir Putin doesn't take offense. He doesn't care what people say about him. They've been demonizing him for 23 years now in the Western press. I don't think Xi Jinping cares either. But what they sign on the paper, what deals they make with the United States, that's very important. And I know people will say, like, well, the United States is not agreement capable, and you can't trust them as far as you can throw them, and so on and so forth. But having a deal is better than not having a deal, because a deal gives you at least some leverage. Yeah, maybe some future administration is going to come in and they're going to say, we don't recognize this, we're walking back out of this. But there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot to be gained for all sides.